I'm Jordan.
And I'm Rosanna.
And on this podcast, we explore how to take life off autopilot
and relentlessly pursue a life worth living together. Welcome to Season 3, Episode 10 of the Relentless Pursuit podcast, Habits and Routines. So one of my goals that I had started or had stated earlier for this year was 21 books in 2021. And so one of the books that I had just read, I've actually read two that kind of deal a little bit with this topic.
Wait, you've two total so far? How are you doing towards your goal?
I think I'm already at number 7, actually. But
okay.
Two books that relate towards
particular books.
This topic today. Thank you for clarifying. One is Atomic Habits by James Clear, which I think I'll probably end up referencing later. I mean, there's a lot in there that you can talk about it.
Too.
And the other one is Think Like a Monk by Jay Shetty. So he was actually a monk for 3 years and is now no longer a monk, but kind of talks about what he's learned. And in his book, he's kind of talking about our subconscious, and he says this: we live much of our lives following the same path we have always taken, and our thoughts and patterns will never change unless we actively reprogram them. Because when we are on autopilot, we are missing out on life. And so through this book and through Atomic Habits and through some of our conversations, really the best way to take your life off autopilot and to kind of reprogram those thoughts and patterns that we just do because we've always done them is to check your habits and to reset your routines. Mm-hmm. And so that's really what this conversation is about today, is kind of looking at our habits, looking at our routines, and seeing how we can use those to be more effective and be more present and even accomplish more in our everyday.
So what I'm hearing you saying is that habits and routines are good, but they also have the tendency to maybe become negative in a sense too, where we develop habits and routines, but when it's something that we didn't intend or didn't design, then it can be an unproductive one or an unhealthy one for us. Yeah,
I mean, when I think of the term habits, I always kind of couple it with like bad habits, right? Like most people don't talk about good habits, they talk about bad habits. So whether it's like biting nails or, you have that habit of like picking that piece of skin on your thumb.
Okay, let's just put it out there for
air
everybody.
The dirty laundry, right? Or my bad habit of waking up, rolling over and picking up my phone and starting to scroll right away. Like those are just habits that we automatically do. It's not things that we think about. We just do them, and they're not always beneficial for us. So, kind of looking at the habits that we just naturally do and kind of questioning why, and then reprogramming our habits to form better routines. So do you remember when we first got married, what mornings were like for me to like get up and get ready and go to work?
They were so joyful. We were in love. We would hold hands and laugh.
Yeah, I wish it was that, but it was not that.
No, it was a chore.
It was a chore.
What time were we waking up, though? Because you had to be out the door by, 6:30, 6:45?
Yeah, it was pretty early. I had about a 45 to 50-minute commute to work. The school day there started at, it was early, like 7:45. And I needed to be there before that. And so my day started early. And I was not a morning person. I've really never been a morning person. I would much prefer to like stay up late and sleep in. That's just kind of how I roll, which is the opposite of you, where you like roll over before your alarm just naturally. You're excited about your day, and you would get up and like read for enjoyment before your day started.
Right. I remember reading in bed because I didn't want to leave your side, but I would wake you up when I was turning the pages.
But then for me, it was like a rush to like hurry up and get ready so I could get out the door. I'd even like eat breakfast in the car because I had such a long ride. And you were great because I'd be getting ready and you would like pack my lunch for me and like have breakfast and hand it to me, and like you'd kiss me and you'd like send me. It was a rush. And looking back on that now, I wish I had a better routine for my mornings starting then. Mm-hmm. But I had always told myself that I wasn't a morning person. And so my morning habits and my morning routines like were never really developed until just recently. So like that got me thinking, even in terms of this conversation, how many of us do the same thing year after year, hoping to transform our lives, right? We set these big goals, but then we don't change anything about our life.
So not just with our mornings, but there's certain things we believe about ourselves and just certain patterns that we fall into that are not, like, I wouldn't consider it even a bad pattern. It was just what would you call it, like neutral? It was reactive.
It was a right. Getting up to the alarm or snoozing my alarm, waiting as long as I could to get out of bed, knowing that if I just rushed through everything, I could still get there. Mm-hmm. But that did not like help set a good tone for my day.
There's probably a lot of things that we do in life that can't fit that analogy.
So, but that's the definition, isn't that like the definition of insanity? Like doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result.
Yeah.
So, you know,
I've
we
heard
have,
that cliche. I think my dad said this. I'm sure he got it from somewhere, which is if you always do what you always did, then you always get what you always got.
well, yeah. And it's because those same thought patterns repeat in our minds, reinforcing what we believe about ourselves. That's what keeps us stuck in like beliefs about our relationships or money or how you feel about yourself or how you behave. And so I think for a long time, like I had always told myself I wasn't a morning person. And so I never utilized the mornings as a way to like set the tone for my day. And so I was always reactive instead of proactive.
Yeah.
And so I think what I've really learned, like in preparing for habits and routines and even just changing our habits and routines in the last couple of years, is that like making small changes and adding a few habits to your daily routine can have a huge impact on your day-to-day life. And in James Clear's book, he says making these very small adjustments that you hardly notice make you 1% better.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, if you keep getting 1% better, you're making slow and steady progress as opposed to making no progress or going backwards.
Yeah. I think there's a lot to unpack with that, and already I feel my mind going in several different directions. I think that's a good point. I too have a quote. This is from Henry David Thoreau in Walden. And this, I don't know if you would agree with this, but I would argue that Thoreau's Walden heavily informs this show and our perspectives on it, at least mine. So when I have an opportunity, I'm going to slip in some quotes from Thoreau. So this is one of the quotes that he's best known for. Those of you who may be unfamiliar with Walden, it was basically a 2-year experiment in the 1800s. This guy named Thoreau decided to go live in the woods for 2 years. And it wasn't crazy. Like, he still lived like within a mile or two of town. He would go and visit his family for dinner, but he would, for 2 years, had like a small shack and just really wanted to live a really stripped down, simple life. And he didn't commit to it for the rest of his life. He just did it for 2 years. And so at the end of those 2 years, he leaves the woods and kind of goes back to society and continues to write and to do some other interesting things. But he shares this statement because he talked about the kinds of habits and the patterns and the customs that we all do. And so I'll just read this quote and pontificate on it a touch more. He says, "I left the woods for as good a reason as I went there. Perhaps it seemed to me that I had several more lives to live and could not spare any more time for that one. It is remarkable how easily and insensibly we fall into a particular route and make a beaten track for ourselves. I had not lived there a week before my feet wore a path from my door to the pond side, and though it is 5 or 6 years since I trod it, it's still quite distinct. It is true, I fear, that others may have fallen into it and so helped to keep it open. The surface of the earth is soft and impressionable by the feet of men, and so with the paths which the mind travels. How worn and dusty, then, must be the highways of the world, how deep the ruts of tradition and conformity." So what he's saying there is that he had fallen into some particular patterns and routines in his regular life, and he wanted to kind of escape those and re-explore what was really essential to life, and that's why he went to live in the woods. Well, after living there for 2 years, he decides to leave the woods for the same reason, because he had already fallen into particular habits and routines, and they weren't bad, but he wanted to kind of explore more of what life had to offer. And he wanted to explore more of just who he was and what was genuinely valuable, and not just kind of establish a pattern and just run with that for the rest of his life. And then he makes the connection to the patterns and conformity of the world, of culture, of tradition, of a lot of the things that we kind of mindlessly do, but never really, intentionally evaluate it. Okay, so anyway, so that's my explanation of Thoreau. That's my literary connection.
Well, there you go. Spoken from a true English teacher.
There you go.
Well, and I think that's, something as you were, reading the quote, it's like, yeah, like he goes to Walden, right, to the pond, to the shack for something new, but then he wears the path to the pond every single day because even when he's there, he starts a new habit, but the habit is always the same. Mm-hmm. And so he's not, right, exploring or taking a new route. And so that just made me think of you get up every day and regardless of what your routine is, you get in the car, you go to work, you drive the same way. Right? Are we Are we too fixed in what we do? Do we get too comfortable in doing the same thing? We never kind of question why we're doing it in the first place.
Exactly. So I think that's the point of this conversation, is maybe celebrate some of the positive habits that we've established, but hopefully call into question maybe some other ones that we're a little unaware of or uncomfortable with evaluating.
All right, so let's look at those two words, because we're saying that the episode is titled Habits and Routines. So what's the difference between a habit and a routine? So we'll start with a habit.
Oh, I feel a definition coming on.
You know, I love my definitions.
Okay.
A habit usually manifests itself as an automatic urge to do something. Habits matter because they help you to become the type of person you wish to be. So if you want to change your habit, you want to change your life, you have to change your habits. So you can think about your eating habits, right? Mm-hmm. If we have a specific outcome, like we'll try and change our eating habits or our sleeping habits or our exercise, or even, trying to cut out our bad habits or our use of screens or whatever it is, right? It's like this automatic urge to do something, whereas the routine requires like a deliberate practice. It's a regular way of doing things in a particular way or order that help with productivity. So both habits and routines are regular and repeated actions, but habits happen with little or no thought. It's your autopilot. It's your default. Whereas routines require a higher degree of intention and effort.
Okay.
But once you set a good routine, like the whole point is to make it a habit where you don't even think about it. Like when the routine is so good,
okay,
and you're becoming better because of it, not an autopilot that is really getting you nowhere.
So there's probably a lot in our life that we could call a habit, and the goal is to replace it with an intentional routine until that intentional routine kind of becomes itself that autopilot sort of habit.
Right. The routine is almost like a series of habits that happen in a certain order for a specific reason. So it's like, because you do this, step 1, step 2 happens, and you don't even have to think about it, but all of those things help you to become more productive. So James Clear says this in Atomic Habits: your habits are how you embody your identity. The more you repeat a behavior, the more you reinforce your identity. The process of building habits is actually the process of becoming yourself. It's a gradual evolution. The most practical way to change who you are is to change what you do. If nothing changes, nothing is going to change.
Geez, okay, so he went deep. So he's connecting your habits to your identity. I didn't even think of taking it that far, but
well, and let's go back to my example.
It's like who I am is what I do, right?
Right.
Not who I wish I was or who I tell myself I am.
Correct. So it's really getting you to look at what are you doing or what are you not doing, or even who are you telling yourself you are or you aren't. So we go back to kind of like those stories that we tell ourselves. If I think back to when we first got married and what my mornings looked like, and even now I said I was never a morning person.
Right. So you're defining yourself.
Right. I'm defining myself as I'm not a morning person, which held me back for a really long time. Until I think I said something about not being a morning person like a month ago. And what was your response?
I said, yeah, you are. So you did a really great job it's been a number of years, but I would say especially over the past year and a half, when I think we both realized, just because our days are busy and not always under our control. And we wanted to improve our mornings because that's one of our best opportunities to, I think, have some control over our day, to be proactive with what we want to do. And so I guess for lack of a better description, you turned yourself into a morning person. You started waking up early, one of the first people awake in the household. I think you were waking up at like 4:45 in the morning to make it to the new gym that you were excited about. But you make it there for like a 5 a.m. workout. I'm like, you're crazy. But that was a way of like having, like you could meet your goal. And I think we had said too, and I know we'll talk about morning routines a little bit more, but we had said like just, between the kids and like when we wake up, like and
when they wake up, which is so early.
Right. And just so everyone knows, like our current rule in the household is that our children are not allowed to leave their room until 6 a.m. And so they leave right at the stroke of 6 because they are routinely awake before then.
Before that, yeah.
So they're all morning people. So really, to take advantage of our mornings in the most proactive way possible, we need to wake up before them and do whatever is valuable to us personally. Do that first before going into parent mode once they're awake. And so I think you had recognized, and we had conversations about this, because oftentimes you would sleep as late as you're kind of allowed to, and then you're kind of, almost jolted out of bed and immediately, like, forced to be
Put out all the
reactive
fires
to whatever was taking place. And we both felt that way. And so that's where that dialogue of, like, maybe there's a better way to do our mornings. And it was hard at first, but you pretty quickly transformed yourself into what I would call a morning person.
Yeah, I mean, it was a really deliberate practice of kind of changing my day, because I realized I wasn't going to get more hours to my day. And then I also realized productivity for me crashes like by like 3 o'clock. Yeah. So if something hasn't happened by 3 p.m., like, I'm not going to have any more energy or more time in the day after that, especially when you put in schedules and kids' routines and sports and all of that. And so it was, there's 24 hours in a day. If I had 3 more hours to my day, what would I do? So instead of adding 3 more hours to the day, it was really shifting when my day started and how it started. And that really made all the difference.
Yeah. It's been a very successful year. I heard something, I'll quote from Jocko Willink a little bit more thoroughly later on, but I saw somebody had asked him at some point, like, how do I become a morning person? Like, there's some secret method to it. And his response was just blunt. He's like, wake up early.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that, like...
It's like, that's all it really requires.
Right, and it doesn't mean that, like, on a day where I can sleep in, I won't. Well, what's funny is sometimes I can't, because I have this morning routine now, and my body is programmed. It, like, almost just automatically wakes up, like, no alarm needed. Like, I set an alarm even now, 5:35, so that I can be at the gym at 6, but I'm often awake like 3 minutes before that, because my body, like, knows. And we kind of talked about that with Julie Gentile, like, that it was just, like, right, like, you should, like, wake up before the sun, and that there's rhythms to that, and that it's good for your body and it's good for your mind, and what are you doing before your day officially starts. So should we talk then just about morning routines?
Let's talk about mornings. And so I hope it's clear, but we'll talk about more than just morning routines. But this is a good example of, I guess, one intentional place that we've built routine into our life.
Okay. And they say that there's, I mean, some people say it's 5, some people say it's 10, but these 5 things, highly successful people from Oprah to Mark Zuckerberg do to kickstart their day so that they can achieve greater focus, more clarity, and better productivity throughout the day. And the first one is what we've already been talking about. It was wake up earlier. And if you can, without an alarm clock. And really that only, I think, comes through, like, practice, like your body naturally waking up, not to some kind of an alarm, and not hitting snooze, knowing that, like, the alarm goes off. And maybe
no snooze, no funny business. You just get up. I don't think it's wrong to have an alarm wake you up. I think your body may eventually be trained to wake up at that time.
But I think that's what I'm saying, is
using
that
an alarm, people, it's fine.
Your body does become trained. But part of that is that you're not just waking up early after going to bed late and not getting enough hours of sleep. A lot of that has to do with getting 8 hours of sleep a night and going to bed early so that you can rise early.
So your morning routine begins the evening before.
It really does. And I have another kind of spot where, I talk about that too. But, like, we go to bed pretty early. I have other friends that go to the gym really early in the morning too, and they said, like, they get the kids to bed, and by like 9:30, they're in bed, right? They, like, put the phone away, they stop scrolling. They said, in the old days, I'd turn on a show. Like, she's like, I can't do that now. Like, I have to get up early, so I have to go to bed. So knowing that there's a correlation there, that, we're not these, college and 20-somethings that can function on, 5 hours of sleep. Like, you've got to get your sleep so you can get up early so you can start your day.
Yeah. This is like, Benjamin Franklin, right? This is the Farmer's Almanac. Early to bed and early to rise makes a man healthy and wealthy and wise.
I love the yin and the yang to our relationship, right? Like, I'm worried about Oprah and Mark Zuckerberg, and you're talking about the Farmer's Almanac. Right. I mean, but there's something
wisdom. You
to
could
that.
find this in, like, Marcus Aurelius as well, too. Like,
Sure.
It's been, the mornings have been just a perpetual struggle for the typical human being. So a lot of great thinkers have contended with it.
Yeah. Number 2, this is funny. This comes up on lists all the time, says you should get up and you should make your bed.
Okay.
Because you start your day with doing something productive and something that you can cross off a list. So it's like, what do you get up?
As long as your spouse is not in the bed.
In the bed. And what's funny is, for years and years and years and years and years, I always made the bed. And that's something that, like, you've started doing.
No, that's my routine.
And you do that, and it's like part of your routine in the morning, and every day when I come back up to shower, like, the bed is made. And I love that. But it's almost like before I go to bed at night, my kitchen is clean. All the dishes are washed, everything is put away, the coffee pot is set on a timer for the morning. It's like, how are you preparing for your day? How are you setting yourself up for success? It's kind of like, crossing something off your list. They also say, number 3, exercise your body and your brain. So whether you walk in the morning or lift weights or do yoga, do something for your body before your day begins to get your body moving and your brain. And so whether that's reading, they even say listening to like a podcast, they say meditating, writing in a journal, but like also using your brain in the morning as well. The other one is practicing gratitude. And they say that happiness is about wanting the things you already have. By enumerating the blessings they're grateful for, highly successful people become more open to optimism and inspiration and improve their outlook on life. So my current obsession is the 5-minute gratitude journal, which will include in the show notes and probably link through our social media this week. I tried a gratitude journal that I started with at the beginning of the year that I had bought like prior to January 1st.
I remember talking about that.
And I was like trying to like get into it, but it really didn't do what I wanted it to do. We talked about being more charitable and being more grateful this year. And so this was like very like topical and thematic, and it was about a specific thing, and it really wasn't working for me. But this 5-minute gratitude journal is great because it asks you to list 3 things you're grateful for, 3 things that would make your day great. So there's like a morning component and a night component. And then it asks you to write an affirmation about yourself. And then at night, it asks you for 3 amazing things that happened today and like 1 thing you could have made better or that you could have changed that would have made your day great. And so what I love is that I'm starting my day with that now and ending with it. And what's interesting is like I'm seeing the things on my morning list, like something comes of them by the time I write at night. It's like because I'm setting an intention for my day, I'm setting like a purpose, and I'm kind of setting an attitude that I'm striving to.
It's like very introspectively edifying.
But if that wasn't a habit that I had, I would just blow past it, right? I would forget to be grateful for the things that I have. I wouldn't be setting intentions for my day. Like we can go through the motions. We can do the same thing day after day, week after week, year after year. But it's like, what would make today great? I've got 2 client calls. I'd love to book them. Right. And like kind of focusing on that as I'm going through my day, and I had my 2 calls and then I booked them. Like, it's like, It's interesting to see like putting your mind into something and focusing on it and kind of seeing what results from that.
Yeah.
And then number 5 is plan and strategize your day. So I know a lot of people will wake up, even some of these famous people will have like something next to their bed and kind of make their to-do list. I kind of have a tending list that I set out on Sunday night to kind of like break up my week, kind of my priorities like work and home and whatnot. So some people do it the night before, other people do it the morning of, but even scheduling in time for breaks or time for exercise or time for mindfulness or time for meditation throughout the day help them be more productive and keep them on track.
Yeah. Where did you get this list? Is this from one of the books you referenced?
No, this isn't in one of the books I referenced. Actually, if you just type in like habits of highly successful people, like you can, there's 100 articles.
Yeah.
And so those were just...
These were gleaned from this. This is from Google.
From Google. God bless Google.
Yeah. I've had what I would call a morning routine for some time. But I think I'll share the ideal version of it and then the real version of it.
Okay.
Because
I like that.
To be honest, there's kind of the way it's supposed to go and then the way it actually does go. And I think we have to be honest about that. So ideally, I set my alarm for 5, and usually I wake up right before the alarm. But then I would scamper downstairs, and my water bottle and my gym shoes are already waiting for me. And then I just need to grab my phone, which has been charging in the kitchen and not in the bedroom. It's right there waiting for me. I pull that all down into the basement, and then I work out for the first hour. Because
you stream the workout from your phone.
Because I stream the workout.
Okay, I was like, people are like, why do you need a phone to work out?
My playlist. No, that's right. I get my workouts from. So after that, then I go back into the kitchen. I have my protein shake for my cool down. And then I have this year I have a handwritten journal that I've been test driving, and then I do that. And then I have a little bit of time left over for some light reading before I eat my healthy breakfast. And I'm in the car, we'll just say between 7 and 7:15.
After you shower and get dressed and make your bed.
After I do all the hygienic preparations. So kind of ideally that's how I start, and then of course, like, loving interactions with you and with the kids are kind of interwoven with that as well. So I'm not rushing out the door and ignoring everybody, but I get a chance to just enjoy,
Be present for a moment.
and yes. So that's how it often does go. But there's also this reality of it too, where sometimes I frankly like don't feel like getting out of bed. Or even if I do get out of bed, I don't feel like working out. Now, sometimes I'm able to just overcome that and still work out, but other times I'm kind of just lazy or not in the mood, and I give in to that. So I want to be honest with that too and say, like, it's a great plan, but the trick is sticking to the plan.
But I have heard that, like, as long as there is a plan, you're more likely to follow it, right? That's the routine part of it. Like, it's set up to function in a way so that you're in charge of your morning, achieving those things that set you up for a good day. And there's this, like, 80-20 rule, like that if you do it 80% of the time, the 20% of the time that you kind of flail or flounder, like, you're really getting better.
Oh, it makes me feel better. So I would say, yeah, I probably am on track 80% of the time with that. But it makes me feel good that it is like an established pattern, so that if I miss it one day, I know it's waiting for me for the next day. But then we get to 6 a.m., which, as we already indicated, is about the time that the household begins to get a little busier and noisier. So, ideally, I'm having this great introspective moment with my daily journal, handwriting it and just having this intimate, personal moment. But the reality is that our kids talk incessantly in the morning, right? And it's very polite and loving conversation, but they do not stop talking and have, and maybe this is my fault, but very little like sense of like boundary or like respecting, Dad's personal moment right now.
His personal moment in the middle of the kitchen where the family
right?
gathers. Yeah.
So a lot of the time still I'm able to kind of complete the journal and feel good about that process. But a lot of time it's like it's a struggle. And I end up being a little bit more annoyed, and I want to explore this with you a little bit more too, because like in my head, the plan is that I do the journal, but in reality, I'm getting
do the routine
interrupted by it, right? So I want to acknowledge that too, where I think for me, like the goal is to be productive and to be proactive with the things that we value in the morning, and in large part we are, but it's also like I'm okay with this. In the long term, like, there's days where it just doesn't work out as well. And like I said, like I'm okay with that as long as I don't abandon the routine or admit defeat, but that, if the routine is indeed valuable, that, I continue, I pick up right where I left off the next day.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard. Right. Our routines do start at night and they're set up a specific way. But we've also acknowledged too that we can't be getting up at 4:00 in the morning in order to have 2 hours before the kids get up. Like it's,
Well, actually, I was actually thinking about that because I read at night when I'm the most tired, and I can't always read as much as I'd like to because I just pass out. So I was actually thinking, and I'd love some input on this, of waking up earlier for the sake of taking even more advantage of my morning.
Except then you just are comatose by the time dinner's over and you can't keep your eyes open.
Well, you're right.
So,
right.
You have this like quasi-narcoleptic. If you wake up earlier than that, you get a little sleepy.
Right. But that's one of the questions that we have to ask ourselves too, is like, what would it look like if I established this new routine, or if I modified my existing routine in this way?
Well, and I think
even experimenting with it.
Part of it is the experimentation of it. Because obviously within the last year, because of everything that's happened, we've had to alter the routine, and it does look a little bit different, and it starts at different times, and I think that's okay. But if we're doing the same things that we've always done, right? Like we're married almost 15 years, but maybe you've been married 2 years or 5 years, or like, right? Like, how do you get better, or how do you level up, or how do you, right? Like, how do you get to the next step? It's you've got to start changing things, right? Like we all set these goals, these resolutions, these intentions, but it's one thing to like reach a benchmark, but it's really the process along the way that gets you there. So really you have to think about, what is your process? What is your routine? What are your habits that allow you to accomplish those goals? You're not just going to accomplish them just because you do the same thing in the same order, the same way. So
right,
it's that little bit of
magically appear. Yeah.
Correct. When I execute my morning routines and habits, the way that I have them set up, it's similar to yours, right? Like I set the coffee pot on an auto timer. The kids' lunches are made the night before. I lay out my gym clothes so that like it's not like you. I could just like go down in anything. Like I have to be dressed. My bag and my water are out. My keys are out. Right? Like I can efficiently quit. Like I don't have to make decisions, and that's part of it. Is like how can you take out these decisions? Like you stand there and wonder what you're gonna wear. How, like I try and take out as many decisions that I don't need to make as possible, so that the routine can happen smoothly, efficiently, and quickly. So then I can get to all of those things in the morning.
Ooh, that's a nice segue into another quote that I had. I want to quote from Jocko Willink, who is a retired Navy SEAL. Now he's a business owner, leadership consultant, an author, a podcaster. He is a great guy, if you guys are not familiar with him. But he has this line. Actually, he wrote a children's book that I read to the boys. And
The Way of the Warrior Kid?
Yeah. And I don't mean to brag, but I wrote a review of it, and then he retweeted my tweet promoting.
Oh, you're famous.
Right.
So famous.
So Jock and I are like
big
pretty
besties.
much best, right? But he has a line from this book where it says discipline equals freedom. And, in the book, he explains it to kind of like his childlike audience, but he has this in his other leadership books as well. And he explains it like this. This was in an interview. He says, while discipline and freedom seem like they sit on opposite sides of the spectrum, they're actually very connected. Freedom is what everyone wants, to be able to act and live with freedom. But the only way to get to a place of freedom is through discipline. If you want financial freedom, you have to have financial discipline. If you want more free time, you have to follow a more disciplined time management system. You also have to have the discipline to say no to things that eat up your time with no payback. Things like random YouTube videos, clickbait on the internet, and even events that you agree to attend when you know you don't want to be there. Discipline equals freedom applies to every aspect of life. If you want more freedom, get more discipline. And so there's a lot of ways that could be applied, but just in hearing you talk, I think that one of the things that stands out is like we kind of have the freedom from this just daily like petty decision making when we have an established routine and when we're disciplined enough to stick with it, right? So it's already like I don't have to think about what I'm going to do next. It's already been predetermined, and I just run with the system. And that can be negative if it's not a positive or productive routine. But when we have established these patterns that are beneficial to us, then we stick with it. We're free from the petty decision making, but where that discipline also kind of helps us create the life or become the person that we intend on being.
When we automate some of those good habits, then that helps us become more productive. And so what I found is when I execute those routines and those habits consistently, I find that I'm happier, that I'm freer, that my brain is like ready to go, and that I have time for a lot of other things. Mm-hmm. And I didn't really make that connection about having a lot of time in my day for all of the different things that I want until my mom mentioned it. She's always good. She'll text me at like 9:30 in the morning and say like, oh, what's on your schedule for today or whatever. And I'm like, well, I've already done this, and this, and then I've got this, and this. And she's like, it's 9:30 in the morning. You've done more this morning than some people do in a week. And it's like, well, it's because I don't have to worry about some of those things where I can get in what I want to get in. Mm-hmm. And on the days that I want to relax or that like there's things going with the kids, like I have the freedom to like put my hands up and be like, I don't have to worry about these other things because they're already taken care of and I can relax and I can enjoy it. Or I can work on a Saturday, right? Because like everything is taken care of.
Yeah. So I have some questions to help us explore this a little bit more. Did you put any questions down?
I have a couple questions.
Ooh, good. Okay. So, I think obviously when we prod one another with questions, it helps us contemplate this a little bit more deeply. So, bear with.
I think this is one of the best things about what we're trying to do on the podcast is like that if we don't ask these questions, like we're never really going to like start thinking about these things and applying them. And so like, I think that's a great challenge for our audience is like, think about these questions, talk to them about someone, come up with your own questions. Like, don't be afraid to ask questions. Cause I think there's so much learning involved when we ask those questions.
Okay. I'm going to ask this one first. This is actually towards the bottom of my list. And this, you can tell me if this is more of a Jordan question or if this is more of a generally applicable question.
Okay.
Okay. So how how do we deal with something that interrupts our pattern? So, in my mind, I had, like I was talking about the journaling, things are supposed to go a certain way. And when there is, I would say, like an interruption or some kind of intrusion that disrupts that pre-anticipated pattern, how do we deal with that?
That's a great question, because when my routine and my pattern is interrupted, it's hard for me because, right, like you want to accomplish it in the way that in your mind you're supposed to do it.
That's the way it's supposed to go.
That's the way it's supposed to go, right? Like same thing. I leave and come home from the gym. By the time I come home from the gym now, it's an hour later than it used to be. The kids are already up. They're asking for breakfast. They're moving about. They're fighting with each other. The dog is barking. And I just want to sit down with that cup of coffee and do those 3 like prompts in my journal. And a lot of times I can't.
Yeah.
With the kids, I try and set boundaries. I tell them, I just walked in from the gym. I'm having my cup of coffee and I'm filling out my journal. Mm-hmm. I will be right with you, but you may not interrupt me right now.
Yeah.
So I don't, but that's easy because they're kids.
Right.
So I don't know.
This is mom time.
This is right. Yeah. Which, and I think they need to learn boundaries too.
Yeah.
And I think, as adults, we also have to set boundaries so that we can accomplish what we want.
That's good. I'll have a follow-up question I'll get to in a second. But I found that I really struggle with that because when something that I don't anticipate comes up, and I had kind of decided in my mind like what that day or what my what my routine is going to be, it kind of knocks the wind out of my sails or knocks me off my feet, and it feels really hard for me to get back into that routine. And this happens in small ways, like if I'm at work and I kind of have like an established routine and something gets in the way of that, then I just feel like I'm behind, and that snowballs until I feel really horrible by the end of my day. But I found even maybe in a much grander sense, like with COVID last year in March, when most of our routines came to a screeching halt, my morning routine should not have been affected at all. Because I would still wake up in the morning. I still had the same opportunity and time and space that was there. But it took some adjustment, like just some mental adjusting to feel like I could recommit to this routine. And so maybe that's me more so than other people.
No, I think this has to do with that same conversation with Julie where we talked about like being flexible. Like that we have to learn to be flexible, and even though we have a routine and a pattern and a habit and whatever those are, it's not always going to go according to plan, but that we have to be resilient, right? Like we're going to have to like find a workaround or just acknowledge like this isn't going to happen today. So like maybe even just deciding what are the things that have to happen in the morning. Like I'd like these 5 things to happen, but maybe I'm only going to get to 3. What are the 3 most important? When can I facilitate some of the other ones, right? Like whether it's on your car ride, right, by meditating or listening to a meditation or listening to a podcast, not closing your eyes.
Close my eyes on the car.
Yeah. But, like how can you shift some of those things like on your commute to make them happen or, at another time.
Yeah. So for me, that's a big challenge. And maybe what you're saying is that's a big challenge for everyone. So that's just one thing to be mindful of, like, or even anticipate, like I'm going to, commit to this routine. But when something comes up, like I'll just roll with it that day and then get back into it the next day or just do the best I can. But I guess for me, like I found that if I just, even if I don't know what it is, if I anticipate something will come up and disrupt me, then I'm a little less stunned or frustrated by it if and when it does occur.
When I opened that 5-minute journal, and I got it a little over a week ago, maybe like a week and a half ago, there's like this whole primer to the 5-minute journal, and it's basically, it tells you like the importance of it, why gratitude, why, positive affirmations and all of this. And it gives you a challenge of doing it 5 days in a row. And then it like asks you to like, if you do it 5 days in a row, you reward yourself with X. If you don't do it 5 days in a row, you like, not like you punish yourself, but like there's kind of like a,
that'd be good.
15
push-ups.
Right. But there's, something that you don't get to it. But it is establishing the power of a routine and a habit. So my 5 days ended right before we left for our trip to Tennessee. But I brought it with me on our trip to Tennessee. But the last day, the day that we were leaving, I didn't do it that morning. And so I was kind of like bummed that I had like missed it because I was able to do it the rest of the time we were there. But just because of like leaving and packing up, I didn't get to it. And so, the next day, like, it was blank and I didn't have to leave the page blank, but I just, I didn't right on the 25th, but I did it on the 26th. And like just letting go of it. Like, you know, effective people and productive people like do these things, but you can miss a day.
Right.
And you can still be that person.
Yeah. I think of, like you had said, becoming 1% better. Like we make these small changes, and first of all, that makes them accessible changes. And that's why a lot of New Year's resolutions fail. It's because we're trying to make some sort of sweeping resolution to our life, and it's just a little bit more than our current temperament can tolerate. And that's why it falls by the wayside. So if we make like a small commitment or several small commitments that slowly snowball, then we see the results. So I think of like working out. Like you could exercise every day, but you're really going to slowly but surely see results like over a much longer period of time.
Right, it's consistency.
You may not necessarily see any results like for weeks, but eventually they'll start appearing. And so that's true with a lot of these. It's that idea of consistency. Even if there's a blip on the radar that goes in the wrong direction, at least you pick up where you left off, and then you start to kind of see what you want manifest.
Let's shift past kind of this idea of and notion of morning routines. What other routines, like in our life, are important, whether it's daily life or seasonally or annually? What are some of the other routines if we're moving past morning routines?
Okay.
Or habits?
Well, it's funny. That was actually the same first question that I had too. I wrote, what are some habits or routines we already have? So we have our Monday nights.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Right. So, and again, like how flexible do we want to be with the definition of routine? But I would consider it like a routine. And the kids even know, like on Monday nights, like mom and dad are going to have their, what do we call it? Like a Monday night couch date or whatever, right, where we just have, some time set aside to just intentionally spend waking hours together without interruption. And that's been pleasant, and the kids have certainly enjoyed and respected that, which has been helpful.
And have there been times where we've missed a Monday night?
Well, yeah, there's one next week waiting for you.
But because it's part of the plan, we most likely get to it almost all of the time. I would say we do better than 80%. But then we do miss it. We kind of miss it, and we're sad that we missed it. But then we kind of like pick up and resume and get back on track.
Mm-hmm. I would say that there's certain like financial routines that we have, and a lot of it you can do just like automatically as well. But some of that has been very helpful for maintaining the kind of discipline that we want with that. What else? Like we could talk about like is a tradition the same thing as a routine? Because that you can talk about some of the annual traditions we have around certain holidays or certain times of the year.
I feel like that's more tradition.
Mm-hmm.
But I think about like we have and I think every family is different with the routines that they have, but we have a strong dinner routine.
Oh yeah.
Family dinners we take pretty seriously here. I wrote an article about family dinners on our blog when we first launched our website. We take that. Dinner very seriously. It's a part of our day. It's a part of our plan. It's a part of our schedule. And I would say, 6 to 7 nights a week we are sitting down together as a family because that's part of our routine. It's a good habit that we've built in. And then if we miss it, or then there's baseball that we can't all eat together, we're eating in shifts, like it is what it is. But our kids know that that's an important time of day that's special for our family.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's true. And again, like it's not every night, but it's almost every night. And it's part of the flow of the household and something that helps us maintain our togetherness and that value.
Yeah. Any other routines or habits that you can think of?
I know there are. I'm kind of trying to blank right now. Maybe I should have listed them before the show.
I don't know, but like we even have like cleaning habits and routines, right? About like cleaning outside and inside. Oh, I know it's me mostly, but
right.
Laundry routine. I mean, there's all of those things. Yeah. So it's like what habits are
routines,
on autopilot. So like if we think about what habits are on autopilot, what are the things that you do every day, every week, monthly, yearly, right? That are just we automatically do that we don't think about anymore. And have we taken a step back and thought of, are these habits still working for us? Right? Like sometimes our families change, our dynamics change, our careers change, our businesses change, and we find ourselves like stuck doing the same thing the same way because that's the way that it's always been done, or that's the way my mom showed me, or that's just how it's been since we've been married. But like sometimes it's good to kind of step back and reassess that.
Yeah.
Right? Like maybe some of those habits and those routines need to change so that you can be more productive, or so that someone has a bigger share or a bigger stake in your family. Like, we shouldn't be afraid to change those. Like we make those habits, we make those routines, but we still need to shift them if necessary.
Yeah. Actually, I started a new routine this year. For the first time in my entire career, I have been taking a lunch break.
Wow, that's 16 years.
Yeah, so it's been a long time in coming, but I would normally just work through lunch, or I'd still bring food and either not eat it or eat it like over my. Actually, I got chided by my boss like years ago, maybe my first year, because I would eat over one of the desktop computers in the office, and like all the crumbs would fall on the keyboard.
Oh my gosh, you were that guy.
Yeah, so but now it's not glamorous, but it's 15 or 20 solid minutes of not working, which is new for me, like within the working day. And I've been enjoying it. I think there's some value in taking that break and recharging. But that's one intentional thing that I tried to take advantage of over the past, I'd say, the past 4 or 5 months.
And I think that's really important because you should have time in your day to schedule or to make it a habit of, right, like being present and eating your food, like, right, not rushed, in a calm manner, right, like processing, enjoying conversation with other people. God forbid you can eat close enough to anyone to like do that. But right, like these are parts of our day that like help us become who we say we want to be. And so, right, to like work through lunch all the time and to not eat or to shovel it down. I'm proud of you for making that adjustment.
Now, I will say this too, because we've talked a little bit about some of our experiments that we like listed going into this new year, and some of the experiments we've engaged in or intend on engaging in this year. And that's been a helpful tool for that 30-day experiment. Is a helpful tool for me to take a step back from certain maybe just routines or assumptions that I had, and then when I re-engage with that something, then I have a chance to just reevaluate my relationship to it. And I found that really helpful because there's a lot that we do in life that is like we've been saying is just automatic. So if we make even a small commitment to modifying it or subtracting something or adding something, and do that for a short committable period of time, then maybe we learn something new about ourselves in our relationship to those objects or to those patterns.
Yeah, I mean, we started the year by doing that. Are you still doing, or have you done something new or different in March?
No.
That I'm not aware of? Okay. Do you have more questions?
I do. I got so many. How are we doing on time?
Maybe like 10 minutes.
Okay. So some of these we've already answered. I have two big questions, though. I'll ask you this one first. What are some patterns of behavior we do that are required by or even kind of implanted by culture? So in Thoreau's quote, he references that. He's like how deep the ruts of conformity and tradition. And so there's a lot that we do that we just kind of establish ourselves as individuals or as a family. But are there certain things that even beyond us, within our community or within our culture, we can automatically do without? It's it's like a fish in water. The fish doesn't even realize that it's wet.
It makes me think of our conversation with Shannon and Greg Booth, and then with the Regulas with Lauren and Dave, because they talk about, both husbands talk about, right, going to school, working for the Chicago Board of Trade, right, being in that industry and being successful in it and doing a great job, but then wondering, like, do I stay with the sure thing, right, the thing that I've studied, like I've studied business, I've studied finance, whatever this is, I'm going to stay in this industry, or, right, because that's what I've trained for, that's what I've been doing, so that's what I should continue to do, or do I jump ship? and follow a passion, follow a dream, try something different as opposed to like doing the same thing that I've always done if it brings me no joy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that like with our careers, right, we're afraid to leave a sure thing for maybe the right thing.
Yeah. I just want, it's a difficult question to answer because like we almost don't know like what we're doing. I would talk about like social media is one of those things where almost like this it's not even a requirement, but this like assumption is that a family has a digital presence, right? It's kind of weird if you go to find someone on social media and they're not there, but that's a whole other extension of yourself that has to be maintained, or at least you feel like it has to be maintained. But it goes even beyond that too. And so I think of, I'm probably not going to get this name right, but Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie is a speaker. She gave a TED talk about the danger of one story and kind of the danger of just kind of living in your little narrow lane of life without being exposed to other people's stories, other cultures, or even just other people within your own culture who have a whole unique set of experiences, right? And so I feel like, one thing that you and I could consciously do is expose ourselves more to these other stories, to other people, so that it helps us come back and maybe have a little bit of culture shock when we return to our own setting and are able to see it through a slightly different lens.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard stories of that and known people who have spent time like abroad and even like in a third world country and then come back, go to the grocery store and look at the shelves of, the 83 options of bread.
Yeah.
Whereas where they were, there wasn't even one kind of bread to feed everybody, but then to experience your culture, through a new lens, and you kind of really do see like how grateful you are and the opportunity that you have, and where people don't have that, and it kind of shifts your kind of mindset.
Yeah.
And I think that's good. I think it's good to kind of shake up just your mindset, like all these mind shifts, right? Like we're always set kind of like on our default, and our default, is partly because of who we are and even how we were raised or where we were raised or the community around us. But like we have to really work on kind of shifting our mindset, to really kind of focus on what's important so that we're not just kind of going through those motions,
right,
and not realizing what's around us.
So I think that's good, and that's a deep topic that I think is worth exploring in a very Thoreauian, fashion, kind of, throwing ourselves into other settings, integrating with other people, so that we just understand like what really is important, what really is worth pursuing, and what are the things that we're doing now that don't seem like much that could be totally reevaluated. Yeah,
and I think everybody's different. Starting to talk about this reminds me of our friends who moved out of state, moved to Colorado, and decided to live there to kind of be outdoors more and enjoy like the skiing and the hiking and the biking and all of that, and now have even kind of traded that for like a 2-year RV cross-country experience. And it's true. We get this one life to live, and we often think that it has to be lived the same way.
Right.
And so like, that might not be the right fit for me, but like, in my story, right, like I was trained to be a teacher, and I was a teacher for a while, and I was at home for a while, but then I started a business, and I think I used to be almost a little embarrassed by that, because I was wondering what people were thinking about that. And for me, it was just moving towards the next right thing, and knowing that we don't have to do things the same way forever.
Right.
That we can continue to move. And so, changing our routines, changing our patterns, changing our habits might give us some insight into some of the things that we're really more geared towards.
All right, I have last questions. Probably the last question for this episode is how do we teach our kids, or what even do we teach our kids about habits and routines?
I think part of it is getting them to acknowledge what some of their habits are. Like, hey, did you know when you wake up in the morning, like you do these things? Like, what about that do you like? What about that do you not like? Like getting them to kind of explore some reasoning behind some of the choices they make and how they do things. And obviously our 2-year-old is not going to understand that. So obviously that's for kids who can maybe understand that like a little bit better, kind of start to reason why they do the things that they do and in what order.
Yeah. But I think even 2-year-old like picks up on what I call like the flow of the household, right? right? Even he knows like what it looks like to have family dinner, or there's certain thing, or like what the house just culture and atmosphere is like in the morning.
Well, sure, it's not always taught, it's caught. So they see it and they experience it, and then they begin to normalize that. So if our habits are healthy ones, hopefully they would also pick those up.
Yeah.
But, what's right for you is also not right for someone else. So I think it's a little bit of letting them experience your habits so that they see that you work out in the morning at home and that you journal, right? Like that's part of your habit.
Yeah,
so
I
that
hope they pick up on it and be like, oh, my dad did this when I was a kid. Now I can do these healthy habits too.
Right, which, our oldest ones are starting to do because now they want to emulate that, or they see the benefit in that. And so we always have to remember that like their eyes are watching us. So like, what are we doing? What are our habits, good and bad, right? Like that if we come home and the first thing that we always do is turn on the TV and veg out, like they're more likely to follow that bad habit than they are to, come home and read a book or play or be creative.
Yeah. I'm a little afraid of getting them phones at any point, just because of the example I feel like I set of being on my phone. Anyway, but that's an aside. I feel like checklists can be really helpful for kids too. I mean, they're helpful for adults. Or you make your list and you cross it off as you go through it. But just kind of knowing, like, okay, like these are my responsibilities, or these are the things that I want to build into my life to make it what it is. And now I can see it written down. I have a dry erase checkbox next to it that I get to check when that's done. So I feel like that can be a helpful tool.
Yeah, that's definitely worked for our kids. That discipline is freedom. It's like, here are the things that we need to accomplish and get done. It's like, once you get those done, then you have freedom to do what you want to do. If it takes all day to get those done, like your window of freedom gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And your attitude isn't getting any better because you're just dragging it through. So it's like, how do you maintain that positivity, that attitude, and that pace?
Yeah. But at the same time, so like we said, like we set what we perceive to be as positive examples, like working out in the morning. But I wonder too, I think it would be great if they stuck with that, but are we at the same time kind of teaching them the one story that they must then go and live out? Like, how do you teach them to be evaluators and re-evaluators of the environment that they're crafting for themselves?
I think it's about, it reminds me of, dinner time, that you got to try it first. And so that we have to be open to trying new things, whether it's a new food at dinner or a scary vegetable or like whatever the scenario is. Like we can't close our minds off to something completely without trying it. And even if we try it once, sometimes we have to try it repeatedly before we decide if we like it or not. And so, kind of giving them options, giving them opportunities, and not being so narrow-minded with what we present them with either, right? Like you don't love meditation or yoga. Right, but
I like yoga, just not
you're working
the physical part.
But yeah, but you know what I mean. So like that, allowing them to try a lot of different things and being open-minded.
Okay. All right. So I think we covered a lot of ground. There's a lot more that we can explore with this, and it's hard, but this is not something we can go and just like apply tomorrow. But the very definition of a habit or routine is that it is something that manifests over time.
Right? It's these very small changes, getting 1% better over the course of a year. I think it was like if you get 1% better over the course, I should have quoted it. Maybe we'll throw it up under here. But it's like if you do these tiny changes 1% at a time over the course of a year, you might get like 38% better. As if you don't change your habit, you get no better at all.
Or we'll post the actual
what the actual
quote
is. I'm sorry.
on the
totally
social. Yeah. Okay, but we get the idea from that too. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us for this episode of Habits and Routines. If you have a great habit, great routines, have some insights, feel free to comment on this episode. Send us a review, send us an email. We are always happy to hear from you guys.
Yes, and we always appreciate anyone who can leave us a 5-star review on Apple or on iTunes, and absolutely reach out at any point. We'd be happy to comment a little bit further and trade ideas. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to today's show. We hope you will use this conversation as a starting point for your own. We hope you're encouraged to think and act more intentionally.
If you want to learn more, you can visit our website, therelentlesspursuitpodcast.com, where you can find notes on today's show, plus additional blog posts, and you can subscribe to our free members list.
Please subscribe, leave a review, and share with your friends.
Facebook and Instagram are two great places to connect with us for daily doses of our quotable quotes, behind the scenes, and real-time photos, videos, and challenges.
Until next time, let us know how you are taking life off autopilot
And relentlessly pursuing what matters.